You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to commence with voir dire for the defense.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Pryor. I'm here today because Chad has let the court know that he's not guilty of these charges. And what that means is that we have a trial. And part of a trial is that we have to present facts and evidence. That's what a trial is about. Is there anybody who doesn't understand what facts and evidence are? No. Okay. And before I go any further, I want to talk to you a little bit about this process. And the reason we do this is because it gives us an opportunity to get an idea about your feelings, about how you feel about a number of subjects. Ms. Blake talked about cheesy eggs and about planes and about raining and football, I guess, and to get an idea of your views and thoughts. And what's more important than anything else is that no one is wrong about their feelings or opinions. We all have different feelings. We all have different opinions. We all have different life experiences. Everybody agree with that? For instance, and I want to make sure I get the number right, so I apologize for looking down, but juror number 84, he went to school in a very unique place.
Yes.
And I went to school south of there, on the southern end of that place. But what we do know about that is that the people up there have pretty strong views about a lot of things.
That's true.
And the other thing we know about that place in northern Michigan, right?
Correct.
And we have an expression for those of us who at least were educated in that state, myself and you. What do we call the people up in northern Michigan?
Ubers.
Ubers, right. And Ubers have a different idea about a lot of things, right?
That's correct.
Strongly religious people.
Generally.
Yes. They are very strong about their gun rights.
Yes.
They love the outdoors.
That's correct.
And they have got to, under all circumstances, those Ubers have got to love snow.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of snow up there.
It would be very difficult if you didn't.
Right. Because the snow comes in sometimes in October, and we're still skiing up there in April and May.
That's correct.
Right. But the idea is that they come from a different background and experiences. We all have different backgrounds and experiences. You understand that, right?
Yes.
And it's hard. I spent a lot of time up there in my summers. Okay? And I agreed with some of the things those folks did for. I disagreed with some of the things, but we all have different perspectives, right?
Correct.
And all of us have different perspectives as well. Does anybody not agree with that? Thank you. So I want to ask a couple of general questions, and these are things that I need to ask just so we're sure and we're all sort of talking about the same thing. So I'm going to go down this list, and it may be a little tedious at first, but it is kind of important just to get an idea, okay? So please bear with me a little bit, if you folks could, please. So when you folks heard the charges, and the judge read the charges, and it talked about murder, did anybody make a decision at that point that Chad is guilty of the murder? Anyone? Okay, I don't see any yeses. Okay. Does anybody believe that Chad needs to testify to prove that he's innocent? Does everybody understand that any defendant in any criminal case does not need to take the stand, and you should not hold it against him? Is anybody going to hold it against Chad if he decides he just doesn't want to talk about this? Okay, no one? Okay. Also, he doesn't need to present any facts or evidence. Does everybody understand that? Facts and evidence. He doesn't need to present any, and does everybody understand that you can't hold that against him? Everybody understands, and I'm getting a little older and talking about civic classes and history classes. I don't know what they teach anymore in school. I have no idea. But one of the things we learned in American government is that we're a very unique country, a wonderful country. And in this wonderful country, these prosecutors have the obligation, and they must present evidence to prove that Chad is guilty in this case. Does everybody understand that? And that we can't prejudge him We can't put blame on him for anything until you've heard all of the evidence. Can everybody commit to me that you will not make a decision in this case until you've heard all of the evidence? I want to talk a little bit about recipes. Because Ms. Blake talked about cheesy eggs. I don't like cheesy eggs, okay? I'm sorry. That's not my thing, okay? With all respect to the Upers and our friends in Wisconsin over there who put cheese on everything. And I mean everything, not there.
That's correct.
Yeah. Ms. Blake sort of drew an analogy between the charges and putting together a recipe. And she said, well, if the state, puts all the ingredients of the recipe together, are you going to commit to proving him and judging him as being guilty? Well, I guess I want to ask you something, a little differently. If the state doesn't mark off all the boxes in the recipe that they're claiming this is how this works, if they don't hit all the marks on the recipe, and they aren't able to prove one or two or three of it only needs one, right? We only need to mark off one item on the recipe. Does everybody agree that the verdict is going to be not guilty? Is there anybody who believes that it should be guilty? Raise your hand if you think it should be guilty if the state doesn't notch off all of their marks on the recipe. No one. So when Ms. Blake talks about a recipe and she's putting together her cheesy eggs in the next 10 weeks, she needs to take care of all of the items on the recipe, right? But the reality is that we're not talking about a recipe here. Because folks, this is a homicide. It's what Chad's being accused of. And really what it comes down to are facts. Facts and evidence, okay? Facts and evidence. And I'm going to bring that up again sometime in the future if you were on the jury. I'm going to talk to you about facts and evidence. I want to talk to you a little bit about what the judge said. And the judge gave an instruction. He said it's a special instruction. And that special instruction is that there has to be an agreement. There has to be an agreement. And then once there's an agreement, once there is an agreement, and you folks decide there's an agreement, then you consider the evidence against Mr. Daybell, against Chad. Does anybody understand, or let me put it a different way, does anybody misunderstand what an agreement is, or doesn't know what an agreement is? Can you raise your hands if you know what an agreement is? Okay. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is go to juror number 1680. Talk to me a little bit about what an agreement is.
An agreement is when both parties come to the same conclusion.
Does anybody agree with that or disagree with that? Does there need to be more or less? Or is it just come to the, Can it be just a discussion about a topic? Juror number 1779. And I've got some feedback on this from, I made this comment yesterday. I talked about my beautiful girlfriend I have, who I cherish deeply. And we talk about a future. And I say, we talk about, where are we going to be in 10 years? What are we going to be doing? And she talks about cooking and all of the things that we do together and our common interests. Have I entered into an agreement to marry her?
Based on what you said, no.
Anybody believe that I entered into an agreement to marry her? All knows. I don't want to tell you what she thought I meant by that yesterday, and it may be a little different, and I think she's taking some liberties with what an agreement is. But when you hear the words speculation, does everybody know what the word speculation is? Everybody? What about hunch? You know what hunch is? There's another big word, and I don't use it very often, but I had to Google what speculation, and all of these words came up, and I wouldn't use this other one very much, but conjecture. Does everybody understand what conjecture is? No? Yes? Okay. So when you're looking at facts and evidence, and you're trying to make a determination of what happened and what occurred in the case, do you think under any circumstances you should speculate about the facts or guess? I see at the very back there, and juror number 229, you're shaking your head. Should you speculate when you're trying to figure out what happened in a situation?
No, you should just use the evidence.
Okay. And in a serious situation where you're involved in something serious, Ms. Blake got into a little bit of detail, but this is a homicide case. Should we guess or speculate about any of the facts in a homicide case? Juror number 126, you shook your head too. Is that an area that we should be speculating in? Conjecturing? Hunching? Guessing? Looking at it and saying, well, you know, this is what I think, right? Is that something that we should even be doing? Does anybody disagree with that? Thank you, folks. I appreciate it. I'm going to go over one last subject, and Ms. Blake talked about that a little bit. I won't spend a lot of time. Being involved in this case, we're provided a certain amount of evidence. And some of the evidence in this case deals with very graphic pictures, very graphic, extremely disturbing pictures. And I've talked to some of the other groups about this. These graphic and disturbing pictures will hurt your heart. Does everybody understand what I mean by hurting your heart? And they will hurt your heart. They hurt my heart. I look at these pictures and it hurts my heart. But the reason for graphic pictures or sensationalizing something is to get a reaction from people. Would everybody agree with that? That the purpose of showing people these things is to try to gain some kind of a reaction. Is there anybody who disagrees with that? You disagree with that? Okay, you disagree with that? Okay, I'll get you. Go ahead, juror number 1645.
I believe the reason for showing the pictures is
Right.
for evidence, not for trying to.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then juror 1779,
Same.
to show evidence.
Yeah, if it's showing evidence.
Right.
It's evidence.
Right, but if it causes a reaction, and the reaction is that you're immediately going to put the blame or cause on Mr. Daybell, Chad, is that fair?
The reaction doesn't necessarily mean that the blame is there.
Okay,
The reaction is I'm reacting to the situation
right.
and the evidence presented. But again, to your point earlier on the recipe, you gotta tick all of the boxes. Just because there's evidence there of one thing doesn't mean that there's a relationship there to build the recipe.
Does anybody disagree with what juror 1779 said? And I don't either. And I appreciate that because you just saved me a lot of time. You just talked about something that's exactly right. And then when you see pictures, it doesn't mean that from the pictures you go to guilt. What it means is you look at the pictures and it's one piece of evidence and that you need to say, okay, let's see what everything else says before we jump to any conclusion based on these horrendously difficult pictures that hurt our hearts. Would everybody agree with that? Everyone? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for letting me spend some time with you. Your opinions about things are very important to all of us. And it's important that we get an opportunity to listen to how you feel about certain things. And I want to thank you for letting me delve into your lives in this way and do this. And Judge, at this point, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pryor. We are going to next move on to some individual voir dire with each of you. And I think I'll suggest we go through a few of these and then take a mid-morning break sometime around 10:30 or 10:45. Is that schedule okay with council?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to start with the front row, 1635. So, ma'am, if you'll just remain where you are, we're going to have your fellow jurors retire to the jury room with the bailiff at this time.
All right, please.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, for juror 1635, there's a few things we'll talk to you about this afternoon. We'll start with the information you do have about the case. You have some, and you've acknowledged that in your questionnaire as well as in your response to that question this morning. When I asked if you had formed any opinion about the case, you said no. But the way I asked it was in pretty ultimate terms of, an unqualified opinion. In this instance, I'm going to allow the state and the defense to inquire a little further to see how much you know about the case or the facts of the case and whether or not that may lead to you already have thoughts about this defendant that would be improper. So again, these are not questions indicating you've done anything wrong whatsoever. You have the knowledge you have coming here, and we want you to be perfectly honest with you, and you can discuss these details openly here without the other jurors. So with that in mind, I'll start with the state to see if the state has any additional voir dire relating to bias here.
We do, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Judge, if I may, I actually have one question unrelated to bias, but I think we should probably begin with that.
Okay.
Ma'am, in your questionnaire, if I recall correctly, you indicated that you're no longer a resident of Ada County.
Yes, I moved in mid-December.
And you were summoned to this trial, even though after you became a resident of Ada County.
After you became a resident.
Of Canyon County. Your Honor, with that, I'm not sure, I guess, I don't know if it's a cause strike or not. I'm not sure if she's eligible to be a juror in this county.
Yeah, I think it would constitute an unqualified juror because you live in the wrong county now.
Yeah.
Or the right county, depending on how you like your new place. But I'll just clarify. So you are now a resident of Canyon County?
Yeah, as of mid-December.
All right. I think the juror needs to be excused based on that. We have to have Ada County jurors for this particular trial. Any further comment?
No comments, Judge.
Okay, thank you so much for taking your time to fill out the questionnaire and returning today. You're welcome. And thanks for catching that, counsel, as well. So we'll have 1645 return, please. All right, this is juror 1645 and has not indicated an issue with either hardship. On bias, I don't know if there's anything to follow up. We've got additional questions I'm sure we'll go through, but from the state, is there going to be any voir dire requested on any bias here unrelated to the death penalty questions?
Your Honor, just briefly. Good morning, ma'am. On your questionnaire, you had indicated, I believe, that you thought that there should be a higher burden of proof than beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's the weight of this is huge and beyond reasonable doubt. If there was more than that, I believe it should be all of it. So I think the wording was a little bit confusing, and I believe there should be all the evidence in order to have a conclusion.
Now, if you were to be instructed by the judge that beyond a reasonable doubt is not beyond a possible doubt or beyond an imaginary doubt, but it's a doubt based on reason and common sense, and there's a full jury instruction on that, so I want to be very careful not to misstate it. But would you be able to follow the judge's instruction on reasonable doubt, even if you held a personal belief that it should be a higher standard of proof? Would you struggle with that?
No, I think I could do that. I think, again, it seemed like, okay, beyond reasonable doubt, there's more there that could be said, and so that's the way I read it. But yeah, to this point, with everything you listen to, I could do that.
Okay. Nothing further at this time.
All right,
Judge.
okay. So juror number 1645, there's another topic we want to discuss with you. In your questionnaire, I'm sure you recall answering the questions about your attitudes regarding the death penalty.
Yes.
All right. You did give responses here. Are the responses in your questionnaire still the way you feel about that today?
Yes.
I am going to advise you that in this case, it may be necessary for you to make a determination in regards to the imposition of the death penalty or some other penalty. And remember, when you're considering that, it has to be considered as if it would be done in absolute and carried out in the case. So with that in mind, in terms of those questions on the death penalty, starting with your answer, do you support or oppose it? You stated you oppose it. Is that correct? You also had a series of choices about the death penalty of what most accurately represents the way you feel. And you selected a choice that says, I am strongly opposed to the death penalty and will have a difficult time voting to impose it regardless of the facts, law, and instructions in the case. Is that the way you still feel about it?
Yes.
When you say a difficult time, does that mean to you that it would be impossible for you to ever vote for it?
I will not vote for it.
All right, under any circumstances, would you vote for it, even if you were instructed by this court that that is the law and you are required to follow the law as a juror?
Well, I would vote on it, just I would oppose it.
So you would automatically have a no vote regardless of what evidence the state provided?
On the death penalty, yes.
Okay, and if there was an instruction stating that you were supposed to consider it because that's the law, are you stating still unequivocally you will not follow that instruction and would just vote against it in every case, including this case?
I will consider it,
You will consider it?
but I do not agree with it, and so, yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, I would like to allow the state some additional voir dire on this topic at this time, and then I'll allow the defense as well. I may come back to this juror for further voir dire also.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you, ma'am, for your honesty about your thoughts on the death penalty. Is it fair to say that you have a deep moral conviction against the death penalty? Would it be emotionally difficult for you to impose the death penalty?
Yes.
Under any circumstances, would you ever agree to impose the death penalty?
Agree to.
Impose the death penalty, give someone the death penalty. So is there any scenario after any amount of evidence that you would hear in this case where you would vote to take someone's life via the death penalty? Your Honor, I would move to excuse this juror.
No.
Any voir dire or response, Mr. Pryor?
Yes. Ma'am, thank you. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Y'all, obviously, I talked about that a little bit. Everybody has an opinion about different subjects. But I want to give you a little scenario. You know, we're all very patriotic citizens of this country. You agree with that, right?
No.
For the most part? No? Okay. You think there are a lot of people out there that aren't supporters of this country, a large population?
Yes.
And I guess if someone was doing something like a country trying to take over our country and they started taking prisoners and started executing people in mass numbers, and the government decided that we have to consider the death penalty in that situation. And I'm talking about the most extreme, the most atrocious behavior that someone could behave. Is in that situation, would you still say, I'm not going to vote for the death penalty?
Correct.
Judge, I have nothing else.
All right, I do have a few additional questions then. There were a couple of times you said you would consider it. And what I need to know is, well, I have a couple of questions, I guess. In this case, if you were first looking at determining guilt or innocence, if you knew that determining guilt might lead you to have to make this decision, do you think that could affect your ability of rendering a verdict?
I guess if I ask for clarification.
Yes.
Those separate, like determining guilt versus non-guilt, and then determining death penalty versus non.
That's correct. So think of it as two phases of a trial, determining guilt or innocence, and then considering the penalty.
And can you restate that question?
If you know that considering the penalty is going to come up, if there's a guilty verdict, do you think that might start weighing on you to lean more towards a not guilty verdict because of your thoughts on that.
Right, I already lean that way.
Okay. If you were still a juror in this case and a guilty verdict was returned that you agreed with, are you stating unequivocally and without any doubt here that you would not, regardless of the court's instructions or the facts, impose the death penalty?
Correct.
All right. I appreciate your responses here, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the opinion you hold, and the court is going to sustain the challenge from the state for this particular juror. These are very rare cases, and thank you for your honest opinions here. You'll be removed for cause for finding that this juror likely would not be able to follow the instructions that the state is entitled to. So thanks for taking the time to fill out your questionnaire and coming back today, and you're excused with the thanks of the court.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So next, talk to juror number 1680. Counsel, is there going to be any voir dire on hardship or bias requested on this juror?
Your Honor, I did notice, I won't say the age of the juror's child. I just want to ask one very brief question.
Very well. Welcome back, juror number 1680. This is time for individual voir dire. The court will go through some questions with you in a moment, and first I'll ask the state if they have any voir dire on either hardship or bias.
Thank you. Juror 1680, thank you for being here. Just a reminder, there's no right or wrong answers. We just want to clarify you. You didn't mark that you have a hardship, and I just wanted to double check. I won't say the age of your child, but you do have one young child. Do you have any concerns about childcare if you were to be chosen to serve on this jury?
No, I do not.
Your Honor, I have no other questions about hardship or bias.
I will pass as well, Trustee.
Very well. So juror 1680, there's another topic of discussion at this time on voir dire. You filled out your questionnaire, which included a section called attitudes regarding the death penalty. Do you remember answering those questions?
Yes, I do.
And as you sit here today, do you still feel the same way as you did when you answered the questionnaire?
Yes, I do.
All right. I do want to advise you that it may be necessary for you to make a determination in regard to the imposition of the death penalty or some other penalty in this case. Remember, any penalty you consider should be done as if it is absolute and will be carried out in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. In your questionnaire, when you were given a choice of whether or not you support or oppose the death penalty, you selected that you support it. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. On the next page of the questionnaire, we gave you a range of options to choose from and select what would most accurately represent the way you feel. And you selected a choice that reads, I am generally opposed to the death penalty, but I believe I can put aside my feelings against the death penalty and impose it if it is called for by the facts, law, and instructions in the case. Is that still your sentiment on the death penalty and the way you feel about it today?
Yes.
Okay, so you would be willing to follow instructions if the court provided you those in this case relating to the death penalty?
Yes.
Would you be in favor of the death penalty in every case where a murder's been committed?
No.
Okay, finally then, is there anything about your views on the death penalty that you think would prevent or substantially impair your ability to serve as a juror in this case and follow the court's instructions on the death penalty?
No.
All right, thank you for your responses. Does the state have any voir dire on that topic?
No, Your Honor.
No, Judge.
All right, that concludes our questions for you then, juror 1680. I'll go ahead and have you return to the jury room with the bailiff, and there will be further instructions once we talk to the other jurors.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll suggest let's do one more, counsel, and then we'll take a break, if that's fine. 1736 will be next. All right, juror number 1736, thank you for returning for individual voir dire this morning. There is some indication in this juror's questionnaire that she's got knowledge of the case. If the state or defense has any questions regarding any bias, we can make them there. Does the state have questions?
No, I'll be handling this witness if the court would just indulge me for one moment.
Yes.
So perhaps we'll just start with that question. As you sit there today, can you just perhaps give us a nutshell version of what information you believe that you already have about this case?
Just what I've seen on the news, just, I mainly remember the billboards when the kids went missing.
So just billboards?
Yeah, I don't have cable, so I don't watch the news nightly.
Do you recall the names of the alleged victims in the case?
Only two.
And do you recall where the crimes were alleged to have occurred?
No.
Based on what you did see, did you form any opinions or impressions about the case?
No.
Prior to being called as a juror in this case and coming into court, had you heard or recalled Chad Daybell's name?
Yes.
What did you recall or understand about his name before you came to jury duty?
And he was being charged for murder.
Okay, as simple as that, just that he was charged. You're not aware of any of the surrounding allegations?
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.